Welcome to week 1 of Managerial Accounting. And what we're going to do this week is just become acquainted with what managerial accounting is. There are really no mind-bending concepts that you need to master during this chapter, other than to just really become familiar with the role of the managerial accountant. I'm not going to read all of these slides, but basically the role of the managerial accountant is to communicate information to decision makers. How much should we manufacture? How many materials should we buy? All of those things are critical. Should we add a third shift? Should we cut back employees on the third shift? How does overtime affect our profits? Those are the kinds of things that managerial accountants look at. There is a sort of an unbroken chain that management engages in terms of ensuring that it is on track in meeting the goals of the mission statement. And it's this continuous loop of planning, evaluating, and controlling, where managerial accountants play a particularly vital role because they are the data miners for this and the implementers for all of the nuts and bolts of profitability. So again, I'm not going to read these slides, but you can certainly pause and read these. So again, the primary purpose is to deliver useful information to the decision makers. Now, you all have had financial accounting, and you might be saying to yourself, well, but isn't this what financial accountants do? Sort of, but not really. The goal of financial accounting is to provide accurate and reliable information, mostly to external users, to investors, to creditors, to our shareholders. And that information has to follow very rigid formats in terms of GAAP accounting. Managerial accounting is different than that. We are not producing financial statements for creditors or for potential investors. We are producing information and allowing our management decisions to be driven by the data. So we may run reports that are tailored to our particular industry, that have no ties to GAAP accounting whatsoever, because we need this information in order to make sound business decisions internally. So in this chart, it describes the differences between the financial accountant and the managerial accountant. So as I said, financial accountants are primarily focused on external users, whereas managerial accountants are focused on internal users. There are very specific financial statements that are prepared from a financial accounting standpoint, whereas internal managerial reports those could be self-defined. A company could decide this is the kind of report that we need that gives us the data that we need to make the decisions. So the reports can be very traditional costing type reports, or they can be as creative as the company needs in order to generate the proper data. So again, I'm not going to sort of go through all of these because I think you can read these, although it's important to highlight that the financial accountant reports are audited by a CPA. The managerial reports, there is no independent audit process. So the integrity and the reliability of these reports is something that is a self-governed thing. For example, this would be the kind of report that you might see from a managerial perspective, where you're looking at tracking costs that are associated with manufacturing a product. In this case, we have ice cream, and we have our standard vanilla versus the specialty berry biscotti ice cream. And how much do we use of a particular product that goes into each of those. Now, as you will see as we get further into the semester, we may make a determination that we can't be profitable by continuing to manufacture specialty berry biscotti ice cream, and that our profitability lies with the standard vanilla. Even though we have some folks that really like it, perhaps we can't charge enough to keep our margins where they need to be for profitability purposes and still have customers willing to purchase the product. So again, just a taste, if you will, pun intended, of where we will be going this semester. I'm not going to go through the sample exercises as if we were in class, but you're certainly free to do those. So because the managerial accountants are often housed within a company as opposed to financial accountants that may very well likely be external consultants, the managerial accountants are very much within the flow of information and leadership within a company. You may have managerial accountants involved in preparing marketing and sales reports for the VP of marketing so that they can be sure that they are properly targeting their advertising efforts, for example. You don't want to be spending money on trying to obtain customers when your customers are really coming from an entirely separate ad source. So, those are the kinds of things. Again, the HR manager needs to have reports and be aware of where the needs are and the costs associated with things like overtime, paying people vacation time, adding a second shift and shift differentials, things like that. And the manufacturing manager, there is no limit to the kinds of costing reports in terms of raw materials, labor, overhead, all of the things that the manufacturing manager needs to take into account to ensure that their costs are controlled. Whoops. Now, while this is a managerial class, I'm going to touch a little bit on just the overall jobs that are available to accountants. And one of the reasons that I like this field so much is that you don't have to reach the top educational level in this field to get a good job. It's not like we're, in medicine, and until you become a doctor and you go through a million years of school, your education doesn't really have value in that sense. That's completely not the case with accounting. Whether you take a few classes and, learn bookkeeping and QuickBooks, there are job opportunities. And again, how far you go with your education often there's a correlation in terms of salary, but you don't have to reach the top of the educational mountain just to be employable in this field. So, being a vice president of finance is certainly going to require an advanced degree and lots of years of experience. On the other hand, a bookkeeper can certainly, with a certificate and some, on-the-job experience, be able to command respectable salaries. And there's all kinds of opportunities everywhere in between. And you can work within a corporation, you can work on your own. You can work for a government agency, for a nonprofit. You can become involved in doing forensic work, which is investigating fraud for court systems and becoming an expert witness. All of those kinds of things are available to people with accounting degrees in varying levels. There are licensures and certifications that are available. The most popular, or I guess the most widely known, is probably the CPA, something I'm currently studying for. It is a daunting exam, if I can say so at this point. My study materials, I got a box at some point, I'll show you if you want, of all the study materials for that. And that basically is the recognized license to do public accounting, to sign financial statements, to represent somebody before the IRS. Although, interestingly, as an attorney, I can also represent somebody in tax court and before the IRS, just as a CPA could. Then there are certified management accountants, and um, this is really a specialty area that focuses within companies and enhancing profitability. Although they can be consultants, they can certainly work also just within a single corporation, focusing on eliminating waste in operations, for example, which would then theoretically promote profitability. There are analyst positions, auditors, fraud examiners, and again, there are government opportunities for certification as well. So the CPA is certainly the most widely recognized of all of these. The Institute for Management Accountants is the professional organization for managerial accountants, and they govern the CMA examination. So for somebody who has no interest in doing public accounting, preparing financial statements, and wants to work within a corporation on management types of stuff, getting this CMA credential is particularly valuable. And I can't teach an accounting class without touching on ethics, regardless of whether, and in terms of managerial accounting, we're not preparing financial statements for external users. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a potential for fraud. It's not governed under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act the way that publicly prepared financial statements are, but there is certainly an opportunity for fraud and abuse even in the managerial accounting standpoint. I mean, think about the ability to, create fraudulent, production targets, for example. If you can manipulate production in one period and make it lighter such that you've boosted your production in the next period and make you look extra, in order to get, performance type bonuses, that is a way that within a company, reports can be manipulated in a fraudulent manner. Sales targets, it has to be, they still have to be faithfully prepared, although they are not governed by the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. That doesn't mean that ethics don't become a factor in managerial accounting as well. Talk a little bit about enterprise planning and management. Basically, this is a trend that streamlines operations and information, and promotes coordination among business operations. And this is a trend that you are seeing, is the streamlining of operations, and as opposed to having silos isolated and working separate from the core functions of an organization. Streamlining operations is becoming important, not only in terms of efficiency, but to eliminate waste. If you've got people both operating, doing the same functions, and you've got multiple people doing the same thing at the same time, chances are you've got waste going on, and you can combine functions and spend less money having the same people do the same things. So this is basically the universe of the enterprise resource planning model. You can, not a lot to be said about this at this stage, but these things will all become woven into this. Another trend is lean production, and they talk about it in terms of production, but it really goes far beyond production. The lean business model is not limited to companies that produce a product. My law practice is service oriented, but I very much employ the lean model. And what does that mean? It means trying to provide quality while basically eliminating waste as much as possible. So I try not to sacrifice quality, but how can I do something the most efficiently as possible, and thereby increase profits and potentially be able to lower the cost of the services to the consumer as well. So the lean business model is how to provide quality, economical products or services. And there is, and this is an example of a Japanese model of lean, which is called Kaizen. And this really takes lean down to very much, no pun intended, the nuts and bolts of manufacturing. In the Kaizen model, for example, they studied how much time was spent when a worker had to walk 10 extra feet on a production floor to get an item, a box of bolts or a tool or something like that, and how much time could be saved by systematically placing the items to reduce the amount of time that the worker has to travel and leave their core function in order to get needed materials. And so this Kaizen model is one that's employed by the auto manufacturers in Japan, and it is touted as one of the reasons that they can most economically produce products in their factories. And it isn't just factories, but it is ever looking at ways of, again, reducing waste, whether that's how many times somebody has to reach for something, or how many steps somebody has to take to get to something. And I'm not going to go through these things at this point because this isn't a live class and talking to myself seems kind of odd. So this is, again, just an overview of what we're going to be working on throughout the semester. Pretty light lifting this week, so hopefully this will allow you to kind of immerse yourself in the material without feeling overtaxed. Again, pun intended. This is what happens when I spend too much time alone in a room talking to myself. So anyway, I look forward to seeing you in the discussion board.